the Overman Warrior Podcast.
Get down, get down, get down, get down. Drop that. Get down, 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 get down.
Hi, Chris Hoffman here. So I say it all the time. I'm a big supporter of the Supreme Court. I love the Supreme Court. America's a lot better for it. They may not always vote the way you want them to, but you do have to protect them. You do have to watch and guard against the Democrat intention for reasons we're going to talk about with the 14th Amendment. You have to watch for further erosion of the Supreme Court as a body and protect the stability of it well into the future by not letting Democrats pack the courts, which they clearly intend to do should they ever get majorities again. So that's issue number one. The executive order, as Trump presented this birthright citizenship issue, executive order, which is under challenge here, there's a lot going on with it, and that's why Trump went down to the Supreme Court to listen to the arguments himself. He has a lot at stake. He notably wants to go there and make the justices look at him, because the unsaid part of the reason why the executive order had to be written is because Democrats have abused the original text of the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment was written in a period after the Civil War during Reconstruction. You have to remember also that the Republican Party was created to abolish slavery. The Constitution provided mechanisms through free speech and debate and the way that states had independence and sovereignty, and they could kind of leverage against each other through competition. It allowed for the kind of exchange that would abolish slavery. So it was written in the mechanisms, and the Founding Fathers were quite aware that that would be the eventuality of it. Slavery was a huge part of the economy of the world at the time, and the movements to abolish slavery were all over the world, but in the United States, it emerged. The abolitionist movement emerged into what became the Republican Party of today. Democrats were against that movement. They wanted slavery. The Democrats were largely plantation owners at the time, or wanted to be supportive of plantation owners of the South at the time. And it really comes down to the ability to produce labor. And they didn't have a lot of mechanisms. Industrial Revolution hadn't kicked in yet, so everything had to be done by physical labor. And the ability to divorce slavery from the human experience, whether you go back to the times of Mesopotamia, Egypt, you got to remember that the Hebrew people were slaves for over 400 years to the Egyptians, and Moses came in freedom from that experience. Ultimately, God did, and the 40 years in the wilderness was part of that escaped slavery experience. This isn't a skin color thing. Slavery is a human experience thing, and slavery was very common all over the world at the time. And it took the moral debate through philosophy to analyze the evils of slavery through free and open discussions, constitutionally protected, to have the Republican Party emerge and overthrow it through the Civil War, and then ultimately through Reconstruction, for which the 14th Amendment was written. And in Section 1 it says, and here's the text that the Supreme Court has to analyze, and this is why Trump was in the court to watch the debate, because the text of the 14th Amendment, Section 1 says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Now, the issue in that whole statement is all persons born or naturalized in the United States. So that's allowed for this whole anchor baby thing to come up, and emerge in a culture where if a person is born in the United States, then they become citizens. So, and then you have people coming to the United States on vacation and having babies so that their child could be a citizen. And now you've created an administrative nightmare, which then gets you a hook into the United States to begin with. So you have to ask yourself, why does everybody want to come to the United States and not other places? You don't really hear these things happening in Bolivia or China. You see people trying to get away from those places. The Soviet Union. You don't have much people dying to get into the Soviet Union. You don't see this all over Europe, where people are trying to become anchor babies in France. It's happening. It's a United States issue because they want the freedoms of the Constitution and what it brings under citizenship. And if a parent can give their kids that ability, they're certainly going to do it at any peril. They didn't have the benefit of being born in the United States. Most people born in the United States, they're a minority in the world. I mean, only 300-some million people have access to that lottery ticket. And it's a real benefit. But can you open your borders to everybody and give everybody the same opportunity? No, because then you pretty much destroy the sanctity of that value, which is what Democrats have laid in, behind the scenes for everything they do. The language of the 14th Amendment had to be written the way it was because we almost destroyed, the country almost died. Thinking about Gettysburg, if not for the pivotal victory there, and then Ulysses Grant being brought in to pretty much take over the campaign from that point, Robert E. Lee having that really devastating defeat at Gettysburg, and then really being outmaneuvered by Grant for the rest of the war, that ran out of resources. If Lee hadn't lost Stonewall Jackson and overextended himself at Gettysburg, we probably still have slavery in the world. And it would be Democrats that would be setting all the policies. And the American Constitution probably would have never matured in a way that we can have the debates we have today. And so to rectify that situation, that language that's in here, that said we won, the Union won, we're reconstructing, and all these crazy radical Democrats that are trying to get rid of slavery and abolish the children born within slavery, they had to write it that way to protect those children. And that history is well documented. And Republicans needed strong language, and they lobbied to get this 14th Amendment and to have language that was strong, that would bring the country back together through Reconstruction and make it so that Southern Democrats could not undermine the children of slavery in the future. Now, because Democrats have their name all over slavery, and now they're trying to, like they do for everything, just like they're trying to do when they try to pack the courts for the Supreme Court, they take language like this and they say, oh, okay, that's the language we're going to live with. All right, so you're just painting yourself in a corner. That means we can have immigration come in and we can apply that to everybody in the world. So anybody in the world who wants to come and overwhelm the borders, they'll come vote Democrat because we want to support illegal immigration. And one motivating factor for them to do so is to come and have your baby, because this 14th Amendment allows you to do it. Because the 14th Amendment didn't anticipate the kind of evil Democrats would defend themselves by saying, oh yeah, well, that's how you're going to hold us? You're going to punish us and rub this slavery thing in our faces and let the babies of slaves become citizens? Okay, here you go. We're going to take that language and throw it back in your face. And we're going to open up the anchor baby debate for the next century. And then all those Democrats, because we made it happen, all those illegal immigrants coming in doing this stuff are going to vote for Democrats, and that's going to be our base. We'll show you, and that's how it evolved. And we've seen the playbook clearly. I thought the arguments made by some of the justices were really good. I thought the presentation by the White House was really good. But I don't think it put it in plain language enough for everybody to understand. And obviously, Comey Barrett and Roberts, definitely moderates who lean left too much, and they're going to read that. They read that word, no person born, in Section 1, and that clearly states it for them. So their indications are that they can't go along with Trump's executive order because of that term. But the executive order by Trump and why they should go along with it and why it really should be a 7-3 majority, I mean, because it's pretty clear. The executive order actually offers in immediacy a corrective language to an amendment that didn't anticipate the level of evil that Democrats would propose to support illegal immigration in order to build their own base by flocking and overwhelming the United States in the way they did. They're clearly trying to exploit the legal terminology that at the time was trying to keep the nation together with definite language that embodied slavery discussions, not just an open borders policy. But the open borders people have used that language and reinterpreted it and weaponized it, and the Trump executive order corrects it. And that's how the Supreme Court should set a precedent, because really to go do the official thing and let's go get another amendment to this amendment and explain it in more detail. I think you could get there, and you can certainly do it, but it's going to take a long time, and you're already talking about a Democrat. When you play by the rules, the Democrats use the rules to try and destroy the country. They've certainly shown an indication to pack the courts if they ever get a majority again. They'll bust up the filibuster so you can get rid of the majority, the 60-vote majority rule. They're not going to honor those safeguards. And Republicans are playing straight, just like some of these Supreme Court justices are trying to play straight and not adapt to the circumstances of the moment, the wartime conditions for which we find ourselves. Because clearly the open borders people, the globalist types out there are clearly trying to undermine the United States, bring it down in order to try and bring everybody else up. And the anchor baby issue is one of their mechanisms of doing so. So the Trump executive order, which is why he went down for the first time in all history, American history, went and listened to these oral arguments to let the justices know, look, you need to have my back on this because this is a more serious issue. The other thing is leaving in the background with this whole thing is, and I think the Supreme Court is certainly poised to do it, it's probably going to be a two-part ruling. As it stands now, I think they need to have some debate. I think discussions like the one we're having right now, the Comey Barrett and Justice Roberts needs to get a seriously about their place in history and the responsibility that's on their shoulders. Because so there's still time for debate to win them over to a 7-3 majority. But right now, I think they're leaning in the direction of voting against this with Trump, but they are voting in favor of reining in lower courts from overstepping their bounds on presidential orders and being able to undo them at some local level. If the people elect the president and he goes out and starts signing executive orders, those orders could be completely thrown out the door upon a next administration. You have to kind of respect the fact that a president picked by people has a right to have some short-term impact that might correct something that is needed out of the executive branch. And you can't have a bunch of radical local judges trying to rewrite and undermine that authority, because they don't have a right to do that. And I think this case here on the anchor baby, the sanctuary city issues, I think the Supreme Court's going to rule in favor of Trump because they can't have that undermining going on by local judges. Any judge in the world just can't go out there and undermine a president's executive order. So I think they're going to go in his direction on that, but I think they're leaning against it because of the term no. All persons born in the United States. That's a problem because the language says born or naturalized. All persons. So that means anybody coming with, because the word or takes away from citizenship. Or means a naturalized citizen or somebody who just happens to be here and has a baby. And so the Democrats have weaponized that language. When it was written, you had a much different standard of behavior in polite society. And I think at the time that it was written, nobody could anticipate that Democrats would be that evil, or open border globalists would be that evil and sinister to take their words and twist it around to a pretzel when they're just trying to free slaves. But the people who wanted to preserve slavery are the same people who are for open borders and for undermining that basic tenet that was created by the Republican Party to free slaves, and use that kind of language in order to keep Democrats from destroying the lives of young slaves born in slave families, giving them rights and citizenship right on the outset, because it went against the desires of Democrats who were against Reconstruction at the time. And that's how diabolical it is. Now they've taken the harsh language, turned it to their favor, and have used it for justification of illegal immigration, and have been detrimental along doing so. And the critical element, and I didn't hear anybody really arguing it that way, because that's the truth essence of the debate. I think sometimes lawyers get in over their skis and try to be too fancy because they're being recorded for posterity, and the case law that comes from these kinds of things are going to be refuted for a long time, so they get kind of flowery in their wording. But the essence is, this Trump executive order corrects a wording that didn't encompass the evil of the Reconstruction period that was against that Reconstruction to free slaves. So those who were most harmed by this language, harsh as it was, learned to use it against America in the future with the open border policies. It's the same intent that Democrats have if they ever get control of the Senate or the House again, where they plan to pack the courts and water down the Supreme Court. And so if you really want to defend the Supreme Court, you better get behind these kinds of policies and vote for the Trump executive order, and understand the context of history, and create a standard that will be judged for several hundred years in the future. Because if you really want to do your job, Supreme Court, you need to adjust to history and not let the slow pace of change allow evil to percolate and to develop a strategy that undermines the entire system, which is what they're after. They're using the bureaucratic system of kicking us back to an amendment that takes a lot to go and approve, and that could take decades, and we don't have decades. The plan for Democrats is short term, and they mean to destroy everything from within. They're waiting out Trump, and as soon as he's out of office, they plan to use sentiment, because Republicans don't defend themselves very well. They haven't been on board with this fight. They've been outrooted because they're too nice, and the Democrats are vicious, and they're just waiting Trump out. And if you don't do it now, and if you don't stand behind this executive order now, they plan to pack the courts in the future, which will eliminate the Supreme Court, essentially, and they will do everything and then some to undermine the United States. So that's what's at stake here. And as it's written, I can understand why some of the Supreme Court justices would have difficulty from a purely constitutional basis. But you have to respect President Trump's need as a representative of people who just elected him through very tumultuous conditions. And he cared enough to actually sit in the chamber respectfully and listen to the arguments, because it's so important that this executive order that he wrote corrects any ambiguity that Democrats have used from the 14th Amendment in order to facilitate an evil design that the open borders facilitators trying to Trojan horse the destruction of the United States are utilizing in a very detrimental way. And this case is to solve that problem, not to punt it back to some body of government that is not going to have the time or will politically to take it on. You either get it now or it becomes a problem forever in the future. And that's what's at stake. So hopefully the Supreme Court learns their place in history on this and will rule in favor of the Trump executive order and help set a foundation that will correct a lack of understanding of just how evil Democrats could have been with the interpretation of the language that was not in the 14th Amendment to protect it from such vile conspirators. And Trump's executive order will do that if the Supreme Court has the guts to support him on it. And I would advocate definitely they do so. There's a lot of debate from now until June when the ruling will likely come out. And this is the kind of discussion that needs to happen behind those sacred doors of the Supreme Court, which I think are one of the finest places in the world. There's no place in the world like Capitol Hill, Library of Congress, and the Supreme Court. What a wonderful place of intellectual aptitude. But it's built that way so that lofty decisions like this one can be discussed at the highest level with the deepest considerations for the future that could possibly be merited. And I would suggest take a break from your chambers, Supreme Court members. Go through the tunnel, go over to Library of Congress and sit there and look up at the majesty of that beautiful building and all the great books and intellect that's in there, and the human race's trajectory to arrive at this point, and understand that a lot of it pivots and rests on this decision. And then go back to your chamber and vote to support President Trump's executive order. Have the guts to do so, knowing that the human intellect over a huge portion of recorded literary history, shown there at the Library of Congress, debated at Congress every day. But know that the Democrats plan to use the administrative restrictions to outweigh the clock, run out those opposed to them, and play the slow game, just as they did with Reconstruction, to use our words against us. And pack the courts, they will. Continue open borders policies, they certainly will, and push America away from a sovereign state to a citizens of the world movement, which is what is looming behind all this. It's diabolical, as diabolical as it was during the slavery era, and that same evil is at work now. And they're counting on Supreme Court justices to read this language literally so they can exploit the lack of thought that embraced the evil of that caused Reconstruction to begin with. Republicans had to create a party to fight to have Reconstruction so that slavery could be freed in the United States, and people who were of slaves could then become citizens and become equal to everybody else. And that's the Republican initiative. Democrats were against it, and they are still resentful of it, and they've cascaded that through their party for years. And now we have a line in the sand. President Trump has tried to help advance the topic with his executive order, and now it leaves it to the Supreme Court justices, particularly Comey Barrett and Roberts, to do their part in history to preserve the United States and the Constitution and the Supreme Court, if you truly love it. If you want to serve all those things, you're going to have to rule in favor of this executive order and go on the record for all history to do so, because it will. That's the best way to correct this language and make it so that Democrats can't utilize it as a weapon any longer. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you ever read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
Thank you for listening.